ideal Feng Shui home. And I'm sure that they were all different. You know, when we look at homes, people live in a huge variety. As Mike said, in the West, most of us do live in square boxes most of the time. Occasionally we open the lid and we peek out. But on the whole, houses are very different, environments are very different. So you've got streets, you've got high-rise, you've got semis, and of course, you know, in other countries there are shanty towns. And doing this preparation for this presentation was interesting because it started to make me think a lot about environment and homes and where children live. And of course, mostly, a lot of my consultations with children and families are in homes where the little darlings are really cared for and well nurtured. And there's a whole group of children who actually don't have that nurturing and that care. And part of what I would like to create and get people thinking about is how we can take the idea of an ideal, if it exists, Feng Shui home, out into the community to start supporting children outside of our families as well. Children, they come small, then they grow bigger and bigger. Some of them live in families as individuals, only children. Some of them live in larger families with siblings. Some of them live in homes. They live in a lot of different environments. And each one of those children is unique. And again, you know, when I open the Feng Shui books and you see all these lovely children, and they're always smiling so sweetly. What about the hoodies on the estates? You know, their children. What's happening to them in their environment? How do we introduce Feng Shui into that ideal environment? So, obviously, a very familiar symbol. And I don't want to teach chickens to suck eggs. But for me, Feng Shui is about going back to the basics. It's going back to the fundamental that underpins everything. And as Mike and Simon have said, that is about the cycle of energy, the rise and fall of energy, specifically in relation to children and adults. You know, we were children once, I do believe. And of course, that energy as a child, it rises and it falls as they go through different stages. There's a huge amount of transition in children's lives. You know, they grow from toddler to school age to secondary school as teenagers, and then eventually they leave home. So through life, how I see the yin-yang is that it's a continuous spiral. So these children are moving around and around this. And the top and the bottom is always the period of transitions. They move into different stages. And of course, we've got the 5 elements. And again, it's looking at what do those elements really mean in reality. You know, studying Feng Shui was great. It introduced all these new concepts. And it was always much more difficult to go out and understand in reality those energies. Because, you know, when, like Mike said, in rooms, and Simon, it's hard sometimes to identify because there is such a mingling together of those elements. But for me, those elements are essential because it's what we're made of. You know, this here is what we're made of, is part of those elements. What we're stood on here is what we're made of, this building, the world that we live in. And unless we interact in a real way with those elements, we'll never build ideal Feng Shui homes or environments. So in relation to children, it's important that children start to really get a grasp of this. So for me, it's about how do we encourage our children to really embed and absorb these cycles and the elements in a real way in their lives, so that they become their own Feng Shui consultant almost. So that they become aware of the shifts and the changes in energy. And I suppose really it's about the adults in their lives, the parents, the teachers, the grandparents, coming to grips with this themselves. Because wouldn't it be fantastic to have Feng Shui games that you played at school? They don't have to be called Feng Shui games, you know, it could be 5 elements. In fact, somebody emailed me this last week with a Feng Shui game for kids that didn't have time to look at it. But so that that children start to really think, oh, you're a fire person, aren't you? You know, I'm a wood. But just enjoyed it and played with it so that they start to incorporate it in their lives and in their environments. And then looking at this fantastic tool. So it is only a tool in many ways. You know, somebody assembled this bagua. And it's brilliant because it gives us a rational way of dealing with it all. So, you know, for the children, just recently my daughter came home and she was saying, you know, they've got this gifted and talented at school. And she said, I'm not in the gifted and talented, so what does that mean I am? And then she burst into tears and she was telling me how hard she was trying. She tried at rugby, she tried this, and she said, nobody notices me. Well, yes, as a mum, you know, you don't, oh, come here. But I said, well, you know, why don't we look in your bedroom? You don't want to go there, really. But what we discovered was that in the fire area of her room, in the south, she likes to sketch and draw when she's in bed. And what she'd been doing was, that's no good, scrumpling it all up, chucking it over there. So in this corner, the bin, forget the bin doesn't exist. There was just loads of rubbish all over this area of the room. And I was saying to her, well, what about if we clear that up? What about if we move that away? And you know, this is about an area that's designated for you to be recognised, for you to be acknowledged. And she said, okay, I'll give it a try. So we're in process with that, and I've got one bit of the room tidy. But of course, this is a fantastic tool to use. Children and teenagers could use this to their advantage. So when we talk about an ideal Feng Shui home, it's about parents communicating these ideas. Parents really walking their talk. Now, I know that's hard sometimes. You know, when you've got 3 or 4 children, it's probably a lot harder than when you've got 1 child, because time becomes an issue. How do you then do this for this child, and this child? So what you do in the home has to be more generalised. But to me, a child is a unique individual, and under the care of the parents, as I've said, consequently, a child's perception, development, behaviour and aspirations are influenced by the members of that family within the fabric of their home. And as such, the energy is constantly changing, moving in and out of balance. Sometimes when we talk about Feng Shui, we think it should be perfect. It should be ideal. Rubbish! It can never be perfect. It can never be ideal. It's constantly on the move. If it wasn't constantly on the move, it would be so boring. You know, we would be bored to death. We wouldn't have work because there'd be no clients ringing us with problems or issues. So actually, that shifting in and out of balance is essential. It's essential for change. It's how to shift it and move it in the directions that we want. So, to end, really, I think she had it. I think she was the first Feng Shui consultant, really. She found these guys. She thought they were 7 unruly kids. What did she do? She went in, she opened the windows, she put some fire energy in there, brought nature inside, got them all into a routine and sorted. She brought music in, that wind energy. I think she was actually spot on. So maybe we'll bring Snow White back. I don't know. And all at the end of it all, we do all of that. And then those little ones, well, they're not little by then, but you still see them like that, don't you? They leave home. So there's a whole issue as well of how you can support yourself as a parent to let go and use Feng Shui to let go, but that's another conversation. So, thank you for listening, and I'm around if anybody wants to ask anything.